All right, BMX fans, welcome to episode 3 of the BMX Commentator podcast. Easy for me to say. My name is Rich Eames. I'm your host, a World Cup and World Championships BMX racing commentator, and we're having casual yet in-depth conversations with the greats and the good of BMX. And the guest for episode 3, delighted to have with me today on the podcast, Mr. Michael Byas. Michael, how are you, sir?
Yeah, it's great to be on, Rich. I always love having a chat with you at World Cups and whenever I get a chance to see you, so it's nice to come on and have a chat on here. I'm very good. I'm back in France after Oceania World Cups, New Zealand and Australia, which was awesome experience for me, and nice to be back in France. You know, have a good base here, have a good training facility, have good friends, and have a good life here now. So it's quite nice to be home.
Good. How long were you in New Zealand in total then?
So I went back middle of December, spent Christmas and the start of January in Auckland, where I'm from, and then basically went to Rotorua, which is 3.5 hours from where I live, and just stayed there for 2.5 weeks with Matisse Richard, and just got prepared for that World Cup in Rotorua. So I was home for 5-6 weeks, which I didn't really take time to enjoy at this time. You know, from the day I got home, it was like, okay, let's get prepared for this World Cup coming up. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for me, for Kiwis. You know, like, we've never had a World Cup before, so it was the first one, and who knows what's going to happen in the future. So I wanted to make sure I had no regrets, I wish I did this, I wish I did that, and I don't. So I'm happy with what I did, and it was nice to see my family and everyone back home as well.
Do you know what? For a first World Cup in New Zealand, I thought it was absolutely phenomenal. The track especially, I was so blown away with the track there and how it looked and how it rode and how even the racing was and how spectacular it was. I thought, as World Cup venues go, I thought it was brilliant.
I agree. I'm glad that you could see that as well, because, you know, like, I guess I've known the people there since they started, and I think the track got finished around 2019, maybe late 2018, and they've worked so hard over so many years to get that event there, and the public from New Zealand supported the event so well. I think the track was maybe the 3rd or 4th version of the original track to get it to what it was, and I don't know whether it was just because I was from New Zealand, but like, it was just like, this facility, this event was just amazing. There was no faults. The way the event was run with everything, it was just amazing. So to be a Kiwi and have that sort of event in my country, I was like, okay, that's cool. You know, we do have some events, unfortunately, which aren't so, like, the tracks aren't up to standard, etc. And if that was in my country, I'd feel a bit ashamed. But no, Rotorua in New Zealand did such an amazing job at hosting that, and so did Australia, to be honest.
Yeah, racing in front of the home crowd must have been properly special.
Yeah, I can't explain how amazing that was. And I've always dreamed of it, you know, and being in Papendal, and you see the Dutchies get a big cheer, or being wherever you are, the locals always get that big cheer. And finally, it being me in New Zealand, it was like, wow, this is so cool. And I got a good reception from the Australian crowd as well, which is quite nice.
Yeah, I think there's, like, BMX fans around the world. I think everybody likes you, and I'm not just saying that because you're on my podcast, you know what I mean? Yeah. But it's the fact that you are so open on social media and you actually post original content, like the pump laps and that kind of stuff. And I think people really appreciate that. And I think that's why your fan base is probably bigger than some other riders. There's a couple of dimensions to what you do. You're not only fast, you're skillful. There's good social content. There's kind of almost a bit of a Swiss Army knife scenario going on there. So I think that's the reason you're as popular as you are.
I can definitely assure you, everyone likes me, but that's all right. I feel like I'm myself, and I'm not scared to be myself and say what I think sometimes, but I don't want to be liked from everyone. But I think the people that know me, they know me, and if they like me, they like me. If they don't, they don't. It's not a big issue to me. But I do have such an amazing following from the people that do support me, and I feel so lucky for that. You know, I've met so many people over the years, and I think I seen you comment or post something about with Alistair Burton the other day, and that's just someone that I met all these years ago in Papendal, and I still, keep in contact a little bit. He was in Brisbane watching, and he shot me a message saying how good I race, and it was just so cool to like have people like that I met probably 10 years ago still message me and keep up to date with what I'm up to. So the BMX world is amazing in that sense. Like the community is amazing, and that's honestly half the reason that I love BMX. I love obviously doing well, getting the results, but the community and the people you meet is also half the reason why I love it so much.
Yeah, and I like the fact that you've got a backstory as well in terms of, you've made this massive move to France, you've uprooted your life from New Zealand and, gone and lived in a different country with completely different customs and culture and obviously a language barrier to get over and that kind of stuff, which was kind of the thought process of having you on the podcast, was to discuss that kind of stuff. So I think probably the best thing to do is just to start from the beginning with that. So how did the move to France come about? How did you decide to move? I don't suppose it's just a case of you waking up one morning and go, actually, do you know what, lads? I think I'm going to move to France. How did it all come about?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different elements that went into the move to France. The first thing that kind of comes to mind when I hear that question is, I remember when Facebook first came out around 2009 and 2010, my brother, he's a couple of years older than me, 1.5, and he was watching these French Cup, Euro Cups. Funnily enough, it turns out was at the track that I'm riding for in Besançon. There was a guy called Bastien Merle. He used to ride these yellow Mavic shoes, and he was just insane. Like the skills he had for the time of, like for that era of BMX, like he was doing pickup manuals, and the racing, everything about it was just like, wow. It was insane. I don't know whether it was because, Facebook and all that stuff had just come out. So we started to see BMX from around the world. And my brother was probably more into like the USA stuff. Like it was kind of like Mikey Day, the start of Chirard. But for me, it was just like I was glued to that French scene, the Euro scene. And that's kind of what I remember the first thought of, I want to go to France. I kind of identified with that. I was like, I seen myself at that young age of someone who was quite technical, someone who liked racing, like being quite creative on the track and standing out a little bit from the normal. And I kind of like felt connected in the way to the French more than maybe the Americans did, more than the American scene, sorry. So from a young age, I remember that. And so I've always wanted it. And I feel like if you want something bad enough in this world, you can get it. And that's honestly the simple story of this is I wanted it so bad. And, I made my first World Cup final in 2022 and I was 27. And I said to Jeremy straight away, I said, man, my dream was not to make my first World Cup final at 27 years old, but it felt maybe 10 times better than if I did it at 20 or 21 because of the path I had done. And yeah, the move to France was not by any means easy. Living here, maybe it looks like I love my life here, but maybe it looks more simple than it is. And I've gone through so many struggles living here with visas, with everything. But this short story is just I dreamed of it and I worked my butt off, and luckily I got in contact with Pride Components in 2019, 2020, and they wanted to work with me just through a product sponsor, and I formed a really good relationship with the guys that are in charge there, and we would talk, so much, and eventually it came down to I told them I just want to live in France, and they said, okay, let's see what we can do. And from there we started forming conversations around how it's possible, and I'm so lucky to have met like Dorian at Frenchies, at Inspire, and then Thomas and Stefan at Besançon, which they've just done so much. They've bent over backwards so much to make it possible for me because they know how much it means to me. I really told them it's my dream to be here, and it is. Even after being here for 2 years, it's still my dream. And yeah, that's a short story, I guess.
Yeah, because I've got written down here on my notes about how long did it take to organise? Because things like you said, organising visas, organising an apartment, social security, paying taxes, all that legal side must just be an absolute minefield when you don't speak the language and you've got all these documents in front of you, and you're not 100% certain what's on those pieces of paper.
When you put it like that, honestly, it's actually so funny to think back. I moved in 2022, and sent my passport off. I flew down to the capital of New Zealand, Wellington, a few hours flight. You have to leave your passport there until they actually approve your visa and send your passport back. And Verona was a week and a half away, the Euro Cup in 2022. And I said to my mum, I'm going to race this Euro Cup next weekend. She said, Michael, you haven't even got your visa yet. You have never met anyone in France. Like I've never met anyone here. I didn't know anyone. She said, you don't even have a bike. Like, I was obviously going to ride Inspire, but I didn't have an Inspire. She was like listing all these things. I said, Mum, like, I'm racing Verona. She said, no, Michael, I don't think it's a good idea. And sure enough, my visa came back on like a Wednesday, booked my flight for a Thursday, arrived on Friday, got my bike on Saturday, rode it for the first time Saturday, stayed in Lyon for a couple of days, met everyone, got a train to Besançon, traveled to Verona with the team, which was just, all new people, Jeremy, Thomas, Stefan, and I made a Euro Cup final that weekend, and that was a heavy Euro Cup. I remember being in lane 8, Sylvan 7. It was just like that week or 2 weeks was just incredible. Like, it was such a roller coaster of emotions, and I felt like it was never going to happen, and it happened so quick. That bit, and then to get the visa was it's still I still have ongoing things about renewing it and etc. So it's a never-ending process, and I think to help make everything smoothly, I needed the club and I needed Inspire. Like, they were so instrumental in getting me a car, getting me an apartment, getting me all those things that without them would have been impossible. So I'm so lucky to have those people. Even Jeremy, like, Jeremy's just a friend and on the same team as me, but it's like he's my big brother, even though he's younger than me. Like, he does so much stuff for me just because of the language barrier, and he knows people, and I'm so lucky to have those people around me to make everyday things that you don't think about possible. So yeah, but you're right. My parents were definitely thinking about that before me. I wasn't too worried about that stuff.
So was the culture shock when you moved to France, was it massive? Because I have this picture in my mind that New Zealand and France are probably very similar in terms of the pace of life is a little bit more laid back, depending on where you live. It's not as hustle and bustle, I suppose, as like the US or the UK or something like that. I just get the feeling that the pace of life is very similar. Was there massive differences between the two? Was the culture shock quite huge, or did you kind of take to it fairly quickly?
I think like the lifestyle is a lot different. New Zealand people are a lot more maybe open. Like, New Zealand's full of it's so multicultural. So we're kind of just accepting of everyone, where France is probably a little bit more judgmental on immigrants or on foreigners coming in. So in saying that, like, everyone's been very welcoming, but I wouldn't say it's similar, but it wasn't too much of a culture shock. And I think because my life just revolves around BMX, the BMXers have been very welcoming to me. Going to a French Cup circuit, riding for a French bike brand, a French club, the locals have been very just welcoming of it. But it's just like the everyday things that are different. Like, the communication styles a bit different over here. The just personality traits are different. Not saying one's better or worse, but it's just adapting to that communication, the way of communication, the way of going about life, and just the BMX. The BMX is probably the biggest shock to me. In New Zealand, BMX is like a little hobby sport, where over here it's kind of like a professional sport. We've got kids coming to our club at 13, 14 that are like in almost like an academy to become professional BMXers, and we've got probably, it is the best club in France, and it's just, that's the biggest shock to me. It's just like, whoa, BMX here is crazy. New Zealand, it's like 10 of us go to the local track on a Friday night to have a little bit of a ride with no coaching, and over here my club's got 3 or 4 coaches that are there every day of the week, and that's probably the biggest shock to me. But again, like my life is apartment, track, gym, apartment, track, gym. So I don't necessarily go out and maybe experience the everyday life things in France that French people do.
Well, I'm glad you've mentioned the club, because that was certainly one thing that I wanted to touch on, because I've got here, you know, how is it with the club? Because I have an understanding of the French club structure, and I've spent some time in the south of France, albeit like, you know, 12 or 13 years ago riding, and we rode tracks like Carpentras, Sylvan's home track. We rode all those in that sort of area in the south of France. We had a full week riding there, and there was always club sessions going on, but I never really understood the depth of a club, because like the DN structure, that your club is a DN1 club. Can you explain to me and everybody else a bit more on how that actually works and what that setup actually is? I could really do with some clarity on that.
Yeah, so that's like one of the things when I was talking with Inspire, they said, "Oh, we'll get you a DN club to ride for." I was like, "What on earth is a DN club?" And like, what's that got to do with anything? Because in New Zealand, like, you just ride for a club, it doesn't mean anything. Like, it's just who you represent. And yeah, I quickly learned over here. So you basically ride for a club as if it's a football team. I think you can have up to 12 riders that are eligible to score points, and from each round, the top 5 riders score points, and that's kind of elite riders score more points than juniors. I think elite men score more points than elite women, just because we have more people in the class. And then basically we have 10 French Cups a year, and whoever scores the most points throughout that is the champion. So when I came here, we were in Division 2, DN2, and we won the division that year. And then last year was our first year in DN1, and we lost the championship by 1 point. I think it was out of 1,400 points. We lost by 1 point to Lond. So this year we're going for the win, but it's a very competitive system. And for most riders that sign contracts with DNs, a part of the contract stage, you've got to race all the French Cups, which I think is such a cool thing to keep those high quality riders in the French Cup system for the kids and for the next generation to see. And you know, you see a French Cup, the level's ridiculously high, and there's so many riders with people that maybe you've never heard of that are in finals or semi-finals, which I just think is awesome.
Yeah, because I remember going to the Paris World Cup in 2018, which was the first one I ever did commentary on. And that same weekend, there was a French Cup on that track. And I think Elite Men had something like 100 or 130 riders in it. And my mind was just blown at that point. The fact that they had so many riders in that category. And then I look at the DN structure, and I've seen things on social media about, you know, you have a team launch and you have a press conference, and it's all done to almost like a professional football level. I mean, I can't imagine any team in the US or the UK having a press conference and a team launch and people turning up to it. It seems insane, but I just love the kind of almost, how can I describe it? The authenticity of the structure, the fact that, you know, people really do take it seriously. You know, there's clubs like yours at Besançon and Stade Bollé, I think it is as well, isn't it? That's the one that Joris rides for. And I marvel at it. I really do. And then you look at the French Cup scene, and we watch the live feeds over it, or I do anyway, because you know I'm a bit of a BMX geek. But I watch the live streams, and it's the standard of racing, the standard of the tracks, everything. It's phenomenal. And we can certainly see and understand why the French have this production line of talent coming through, and why they get so good, and why they're dominating on the World Cup scene. It just seems like an absolute no-brainer to me. And I'm just wondering how, you know, a country like New Zealand, Great Britain, how we can actually follow that and what we could actually take from it in order to grow quicker. Do you have any thoughts on how that might happen?
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of been thinking about that since I moved here. It's like, how could other countries implement something similar to try and chase the French down, and in terms of the results at an elite level. But I think, like, when you're competing with a country like France with so many riders, just not elite riders, just riders in general, it's going to be hard. Like, it's a numbers game, and if they've got 20, 30,000 registered riders, they're going to produce some good riders at the top. And I think that's a simple answer to your question. But in saying that, like, they've started implementing, I think in the last 15 years, school sections for BMX. So kids are moving. For example, Jeremy, he's a good friend of mine. He moved when he's 11 or 12 across France to go to school for BMX. There was a club, I might be wrong, Morse, that had a school section where you could go to school but for BMX. So you got special hours and club coaches, and now my club in Besançon has one. So there's 13-year-olds moving away from home to do BMX. And I think when that's happening with high-level coaches, it's a recipe for success. And I don't know how that would work in countries like England or New Zealand, Australia, with financial backing, etc. But I think that's the reason why France is so good. And if we could somehow implement something similar, then I'm sure that the riders could match the French, because, I mean, being here has kind of been mind-blowing. At the same time, it's been like they're just fine-tuned in every single aspect. You know, they're so technical, so technical. They're so savvy at racecraft. They're so powerful, like athletic-wise. In the gym, they're freaks. They've got kind of all the tools for the toolbox, where you might find an American with some really sharp tools here and something not so sharp here, but they've got everything in France to kind of get all those elements of BMX. I think if you look at someone like Sylvain and Joris, they're so well-rounded. They've got everything. You know, they can overtake, they can whole shot, they can tap manual, they can pick up manual, they can do the whole lot. And I think that's what makes them so strong. And it goes all the way down, to be honest. Like, you see some junior riders and you're like, holy moly. But yeah, I don't know how we could copy that.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a period of probably years, if not decades, before we got to that stage. I mean, you know, from a personal perspective in the UK, you know, my son's school are quite supportive of his BMX racing. They want to know what's going on. He's allowed to have time off school. And over here now, British kids can do BMX as part of the physical education GCSE, as part of their exams, but that's only a very, very small subsection of what you've got in France. And then, you know, they don't nip off for coaching on a Wednesday afternoon unless they're very, very lucky. Yeah. But, you know, to hear that just kind of explains to me and gives me a sense of how far behind the rest of the world are to France, and how much work other countries like the UK, the US have got to put in to get to that level. And that's the reason why the French are as strong as they are. Just going back.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's all right, mate. Crack on.
I think that we need to be appreciative of the French era now, like the era that we've got now with Sylvain, Joris, even a little bit before that, but the young ones coming through, Mayu, Rencurel, Maillet, Eddie. Like, I don't think that necessarily is going to be an ongoing trend. And I think we really need to appreciate what we have now in terms of BMX fans, because that is the era that we've got now with this many French riders. It might not roll on the next 10 years. So I think as a BMX fan, we need to really appreciate it, because yes, the French are good, and yes, they have a good system in place, but it doesn't mean that they're going to be this dominant for the next 10, 15 years. I think you see someone like Switzerland with such little riders in their country producing such high level of riders, and quite a few of them as well. So I'm not too sure France are going to have this for the next 10, 15 years. I think we really are quite lucky to witness this right now.
Yeah, because not so long ago, it was the Dutch who were the dominant country. And now we kind of move on to the French. And then you could probably see maybe in 5 years' time or whatever it might be, New Zealand, yeah. I was thinking more of the South Americans, the Colombians and the Argentinians, and the you know, the riders that they're bringing through, you know, like Federico Capello and that kind of stuff. And, you know, he's 16 years old and making World Cup mains in under 23 and winning world titles. I think that's another kind of hidden scenario or a hidden situation where, you know, that countries like that could bring riders through that we literally never heard of, and they just turn up and start winning. But
the interesting thing with BMX, sorry to interrupt again, is that, you know,
it's all right,
because there's not too much money in our sport. It's keeping those young guys at a progression. I mean, I've been in BMX so many years now, and the amount of talented kids that have never done anything because of they've stopped doing BMX or they haven't had the support to continue on that growth of their natural talent is like there's so many kids that, you know, has been the next Stromberg, the next Joris, and they've just disappeared. And so I think it's important for a country to be able to keep those riders in, because you see so many talented junior men that just never go on to fulfill their potential. So it's about those countries holding on to them and really developing their growth all the way through to being a top level elite rider, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think they've got to be able to see a pathway through and have a sustainable career out of it, because you know there's like you've got to make that decision. I think when you get to like 18 or 19 years old, it's like, do I pursue this path of being a BMX racer and try and get to the Olympics, where there might be a, you know, a 1 in, I don't know, however many, like there might be 5 riders on the squad, you might have a 1 in 5 chance, but by the same token, once you've done all the graft and all the races, there might only be 1 spot available for you to go to the Olympics. Or, you know, you might have parents going, well, you know, you could go to university and do your degree in engineering or accountancy or whatever it might be, and, you know, start on the path to a real life. And I think you've got to have, when you get there, when you get to the point where you've got to make that decision, there's got to be a definitive, sustainable path for you to be a full-time athlete. And I think if that path's not there, that's probably what draws a few of those junior men away. That's kind of the way I see it anyway.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it comes, I think in our sport, because there's not much money, it comes down to how bad do you want it. And I think that's everything in life. If you want it bad enough, you can make it happen. But you also obviously need support, whether it's from your federation, from your parents, from sponsors, from whoever.
Right. Okay. Fab. I'm glad we've covered that bit off anyway. But there was certainly one thing that's come to my attention in the last week that I wanted to ask you about. And I stumbled across on YouTube the other day the new documentary series about the French Cup, the one that's a little bit like Drive to Survive and that kind of thing, where you're following the riders through the French Cup series. And obviously you're on it. You get interviewed on it quite substantially in episode 1. I enjoyed it immensely. I reached out to Clément Jurin. I think his surname is Jurin. Clément Jurin. Yeah. Reached out to him, told him how much I loved it. That series is amazing. I can't wait for more. How did that all come about? Do you know anything about that, or how did you become involved in it?
I think BMX Media have done like a really good job at the stuff over the years, and I've always seen them do like a day in the life, or they've followed riders through French Cups before, but it will just be a one-off thing with one person. So I'm guessing that maybe Drive to Survive inspired them. I'm not actually completely sure, but I just got the message, I think a week before or 5 days before that French Cup last year, that they wanted to follow me for a day. And, you know, that was the first French Cup of the year, and they put a microphone on me. We went to team dinner, and they just basically follow you around for 24 hours. Sometimes you don't know they're there, but they're just, you know, behind you videoing, and you're always mic'd up, your race mic'd up. And unfortunately, as you would have seen, I was sick in the video and I didn't really get to display a good version of myself. But I think looking back on the episode as you did, it was such a cool idea, and to see so many different perspectives from different riders is pretty cool, especially in our sport where you don't really get to see that as much. And it's cool for me to see inside some other teams and what their dynamics like and what the coaches think as well. And it was nice to hear what Thomas was thinking of me at the time, because it was a rough period for me. And looking back, it's quite nice to see me come out the other side now.
Yeah, it's very much, like I said, a Drive to Survive type documentary. I have actually reached out to Clément and asked him if there's any possibility of having English subtitles on it, because I can kind of pick things out and try and work out what's going on, but I haven't got the full story, and I would just love to dive into it deeper and really understand it and get involved in it, because I just think it's a phenomenal piece of documentary making. I also think it's a great advert for the sport of BMX. And I'm already gripped, and I don't understand half of what's going on. I still like it. I still enjoy it. So, yeah, I think that documentary series was brilliant, and it does give you a real insight into the French Cup scene as well. And if anybody out there can track it down on BMX Media, just honestly go and watch it. It's on YouTube, and it's brilliant. What I wanted to ask you as well was, obviously you've done a few of the French indoor races now as well. How have you found that side of things, doing things like Saint Etienne and Avignon and those kind of races? How have you enjoyed the French indoor race series?
Yeah, so last year, so just in October, November last year was my first French indoor. Avignon was my first one, and that was incredible. You know, they did Tarsiel turns just for the weekend and obviously destroyed the track after. And the atmosphere there was pretty cool. Obviously, being in an arena, and on the first night, on the Saturday night, they do like a big pro show. So everyone 17 plus is in the pro show. So I think we had like 120 plus riders, and it was just incredible. You know, you start off the day and your first moto was, I kind of knew one or two people in it, and you get through that, and then you're just working your way through to that final, and it's just like a showdown. And they do such a good job at promoting the pros and making it like a show. So that was amazing. And then a couple of weeks later was Saint Etienne, which is obviously more renowned. As a kid, I seen Saint Etienne every year, but it was kind of just like every big hitter was there. Joris was there. Everyone was there. So to go there last year, it was really special. Just to be a part of it, and the atmosphere was amazing. The event building, like the organization of everything, was incredible to see. The track was like, it was different. I kind of enjoyed it. You know, I grew up on dirt turns, and to go from Avignon with Tarsiel turns to Saint Etienne with soft dirt turns, it was a bit of fun, to be honest with you. So I'll definitely be back.
Yeah, it's almost retro, isn't it? A little bit 80s having dirt turns, which I think is quite cool.
Even in the 2000s, I don't know about Great Britain, but in the 2000s, we had dirt corners in New Zealand. And I was actually just watching videos the other day from when I was 3, 4, 5 riding, and it's such a different sport almost, but it's different skills, you know, turning on dirt turns and reading the race off dirt turns is completely different to Tarsiel. So it's cool. I enjoy all elements of BMX, and I think it's wicked. But the French atmosphere is, I think it's the best in the world. You know, I've never been to the Grand, so I can't really comment about that. But I think, you know, if you were in Nantes in 2022, the atmosphere there was outrageous. I've been to some pretty big football games, and that was outrageous. And the Avignon Saint Etienne, for a little indoor race, it's pretty special there as well.
Yeah, definitely. Talking of football, are you still a Fulham FC fan?
You can't change, can you?
No, you're not allowed to change. Sorry.
Yeah, of course I am. Well, that's not too bad this year, mid-table.
Yeah, they're doing all right. Could be worse. You could be a Wigan Athletic fan.
Yeah, it could be a Wigan fan.
I mean? Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, just diversifying a little bit there as well. I think, do you see yourself ever moving back to New Zealand from France? The only reason I asked this was a friend of mine moved to the US a few years ago, a guy called Dan Clifford, and he was moving out there for work. And I said to him, Dan, you're not coming back to the UK. It's not happening. He said, oh yeah, I'll be back. Give it 5 years. He said, I'll come back. Anyway, he moved from the US to Brazil, met a Brazilian girl, married a Brazilian girl. Now he's got a family, and he's moved back to the US again, and he's not coming back to live in the UK. So do you see a time where you'll ever leave France? Could you see yourself settling there and building a life?
I'd take every day as it comes, to be honest with you. I know that's so cliche, but it's honestly true. I can't think ahead of tomorrow or the next week. I'm not a planner. I'm a wing it kind of person, and if I try and think ahead, well, New Zealand is home, and I love New Zealand. The lifestyle, the scenery, everything about it is home. My family. So yes, I want to say I will go home one day, but it's not for the next year or 2 years or 3 years or 4 years. Like, France is such a difficult place to live in a nice way. You know, obviously the language barrier, it's not home, which makes it automatically harder. So I enjoy the challenge. I really enjoy the challenge, and until I feel like it's boring or there's no challenge here, then I want to stay here. But when I'm content, I think I do want to move home to New Zealand.
Okay, that's a cool answer, actually. What's the biggest life lesson from BMX that you've learned that has stood you in good stead living in France?
There's too many. There's too many to say one. The biggest life lesson. The biggest life lesson has to be where there's a will, there's a way. And I think that goes with everything. If you want something bad enough, you can make it happen. And it sounds so cheesy, but I think it's so true. You know, from living in New Zealand, never being number one, I was never a national champion as a kid ever, until my first year in Elite Men, which was my first national title. I was never the most confident person, especially on the bike, but I was never a confident person in life. And to be able to say I can live in France racing BMX bikes around the world is a different world away from the kid I grew up as. And it's something that I wanted, and it's something that I chased for years and years and years. And it almost scares me sometimes when I think back to when I was first year in Elite or second year junior. And I'm sure everyone can say this, but I used to train my ass off, and I kind of had I couldn't dream of what I'm doing now, if that makes sense. I feel like I could dream big, but I couldn't dream of what I'm doing now. I didn't think that was possible. So I think the biggest lesson I've learned is if you want something bad enough, you can have it no matter what it is.
Wow, that's so cool. That is so cool. I just realised we didn't actually touch on your role at Frenchies, because obviously you're in France, you've got to work, you've got to earn the money to pay the rent and feed yourself and everything else, and you have a job at Frenchies Distribution. I'm assuming you're still there.
It's kind of changed. You know, when I first came here, we had a plan with Dorian at Frenchies and Mark at Frenchies to live in Lyon, to be in at the office every day. And obviously I didn't know anything about France, like in terms of the geography, where Lyon was to Besançon, or what requirements I had from the club and stuff. And within the first month, I guess, I had to travel to and from Lyon to the club. And when I was coming to the club, you know, I got to train with Jeremy. At the time, Leo Garian was here. We had really good under 23s, etc. And the track's really cool here. We've got a really cool gym. The city really gets behind our club here, so you're really well supported if you ride for our club. And I spoke to Dorian and the guys at Frenchies, and I said, like, I think if I want to really make the most out of this year and my time in France, I need to be based there. What do you think? And they kind of were open to that, and they said, yep, obviously Jeremy rides for Inspire as well, so it's cool that me and him can be here and I guess work together with the brand. And they were very supportive of that. So my role with them kind of changed as soon as I got here. And you know, I always helped Dorian with the marketing, social media side of things, trying to help with the English relationships we have, and trying to expand Inspire into New Zealand, Australia, America, England as well. And we've just actually signed with an American company, so now we're distributing into America, which is a lot of hard work from the guys at Frenchies, which is cool to see their brand expanding. So my role definitely changed from when I first came here, and it's more now just as a rider. But I do try and help as any way I can. If there's any way I can help with Dorian, then I'm doing that. And yeah.
Okay. Did have a note down here that said social media ? So you've kind of answered the question that I had there, which is great. I suppose a bit of a comedy question for you now. This was passed on to me by a friend of mine. He said, ask Michael. He said, if there's a World Cup rugby final, New Zealand versus France, you're sat in a bar in Lyon or Besançon or wherever else, who do you support and cheer for?
New Zealand, 100%. We actually had this last year. It was the opening game of the World Cup. It was New Zealand versus France, and we had I don't know what we were doing at the track, but we had a massive barbecue. I guess we were celebrating something, and I was going for New Zealand. I'll always go for New Zealand. Every day of the week, I'll go for New Zealand. You can't take that out of me. And I've got a cool video coming out with Matisse Rago-Richard. about my life. A short video. It's kind of from the World Cups and stuff, and just making that video made me realize like how much I am proud to be a Kiwi, how proud I am to be from New Zealand, and the values I have stuck with me from my childhood being a Kiwi, and I don't want to lose. I won't lose that. It's impossible I'll lose that, but yeah, I'll never cheer for France in anything.
That's good. That's quite funny. That's tickled me, that has. So what are the plans for the future for you? How do you see the next couple of years panning out, both on the bike and off the bike?
I guess that what I said before is I'm not much of a planner. I want to take it every day, every race. I think in terms of BMX, I feel very, very unexperienced. Like, regardless of my age, I've done 2 full seasons of a World Cup now, which isn't very many. You know, most kids, European kids, are, you know, doing a first season when they're second year junior, first year under 23, first year elite or whatever. So I've done 2 full seasons now of like the Euro, French Cups and World Cups, and I feel so hungry. I can imagine if you've done it for 10 years, you might get a bit complacent or a bit bored or a bit, I don't know the word, but you might get a bit like over it. But I'm far from that. I think if you follow me, you can see my results in riding only getting better. So I can't see me stopping anytime soon, next year, the year after. Like, I feel like I have so much more to achieve, and when my results are only getting better and my riding's getting better, I want to maximize that. And when I do quit, I want to feel like I did everything I could to have had the best career I had. And whether that's a couple more years, I don't know. It will be something that you'd feel. I can't predict that. And after BMX, I want to stay involved. I want to give back my knowledge. I feel like I have such a different outlook on BMX than 99.9% of people when it comes to racing, training, everything. So I want to give my knowledge, or, you know, my opinion back. And I've never had a coach growing up. I've dabbled with 1 or 2 coaches for a few months here and there, but for 26 years, it's just been me, my brother, and my dad kind of just learning as we go. And I feel like doing it that way has taught me so many things about myself, because I've had to kind of learn it that way. And I feel like I understand BMX quite a lot from doing it that way.
Yeah. I mean, obviously you get to train with Jeremy on the regular. How was his influence kind of rubbed off on you? How was his riding and his style and his training, the fact that you're now living in France, how has that changed your approach?
Well, his gaits definitely haven't rubbed off on me, unfortunately, but he's given me confidence. And to be honest, that's something that I told you I lacked, and that's something that it's always something to work on. I don't know whether with everyone, but for me in BMX, it's a confidence thing. And Jeremy's given me so much confidence from the first time I met him. He's given me confidence. Having a training partner as quick as him, you know, it doesn't get any worse than that on race day. You know, you're training against the fastest guy in the world. So come race day, no one's going to smoke you out the gate more than he does, which is a nice feeling to have. I used to show up to World Cups in the past, like no idea where I was at. I used to train for like 6-8 months in New Zealand alone, and then fly over to Manchester and be like, far out, like, am I going to whole shot this World Cup, or am I going to get LCQ'd? I've got no idea. And that's not a nice feeling. That's not a nice feeling to have an unknown, because you get a shock, and it's normally not a nice shock. It's normally like, oh shit, like I'm still rubbish. So having Jeremy is just such a good benchmark. Confidence. He gives me so much confidence. Such a nice guy. He is a big part to my successes since being over here, and a lot of people have seen my riding improve. And a lot of it is down to training with him every day on the track, everything. So it helps. But we've got a pretty good club here. We've got Matisse Rago-Richard now, which is maybe one of the most skillful guys in the world, and he definitely makes you feel humbled every day. If you think you're a technical rider, you should try a ride with him, and then you'll feel pretty normal. So having both of those guys, and we've got some young guys that are pretty impressive as well. So it's just learning. I said that when I came here, I wanted to learn about BMX. I wanted to grow as a rider, grow as a human. And that's what I'm doing from these riders that they're actually younger than me, but they're so much more experienced and well-rounded than me.
Where do you feel your biggest improvements come from in the time that you've been in France in terms of your riding? I know you said Jeremy's been an influence and the kids at the club have been an influence. If you were to critically look at your riding and go, this part of my game has improved so much more living in France, what would that be?
I think it's my confidence. So it's not really about I think like my gaits are better. They're definitely not my strength. But my gaits are definitely better. Believing in my strengths as something that have been improved over here. You know, I get to see my strengths more and more each day, and I have this thing, you know, like I feel like if I race in New Zealand or Australia, I can feel like I have good track speed, but then I come to France and I automatically be like, okay, well, my track speed's not going to be that good against these guys. Like they're the best in the world. And then slowly but surely you start to prove to yourself that it is good. Your track speed is good, or your strengths are your strengths for a reason. And it is a confidence thing, but it's also improving those strengths and improving those weaknesses. But if I had to pinpoint it, I would say my gaits, which I never thought I would say out loud, but I think it's my gaits that have stepped up a little bit.
And that's certainly something you need at the elite level, a decent gait.
You need to be so well-rounded, which is, you can't have one strength unless you can't. You need to be so well-rounded in the elite level. You need to be able to overtake, because you can't hold shot from round one to the final. So you need to be so well-rounded, and that's definitely what I'm working on.
Okay, cool. Got a couple of extra questions just before we wrap this thing up. First one is, I've got a note down here that says, is the south of France the new Southern California? What do you think?
We're at the south of France. You thinking Sarians or?
Well, kind of that region, I suppose. Sarians, Carpentras, Cavaillon, all those tracks around there. Like I said, I did a tour there in 2012 and rode them all and just thoroughly enjoyed themselves. And it's becoming, I think, a little bit of a BMX mecca, because obviously Nick and Simon were living down there for a while. You're in that neck of the woods, in inverted commas. You know, it used to be that everybody would move out to Southern California. Now, suddenly it's like France is becoming the hot place to be. So, yeah, that was kind of my mindset with it. Is the south of France the new Southern BMX Southern California? What do you think?
Yeah, maybe it is. Obviously, in America, they've all moved to the other side of the country, and they're all in Florida now. But I think, yeah, maybe they kind of go in waves, you know, like Nick they'll go to Sarians for a bit, and now they'll go back to the Netherlands. But I think it's definitely such a good place to be. The tracks are good. The weather's pretty standard, pretty good. And the level of the riders there. I've been to a few gate days in Sarians, and it's like a World Cup practice. It's like, whoa. But yeah, maybe it is.
Okay, if you could win any race in the world, be it a race that's yet to take place, a race that took place in the past, something that you've personally raced in, if you could only win one race from any era ever, which race would it be and why?
Whoa. The one that comes to mind would be the World Champs in Nantes, just because the atmosphere. And I remember I was lucky enough to make a semi there, and they had a big wall up behind the gate, and I remember being behind the gate waiting for my semi, and the gate before me had a few French guys, and when they read out the French name, the crowd was crazy. And I remember just taking a moment there just to be like, whatever happens in the semi, like, how sick is this? Like, this is maybe once in a lifetime. So I think if I went on to the final and then I won that, I know I'm not French, but I think the crowd would have been crazy regardless of who won. They were just there for the weather was good, everything was good. So from races I've done, I'm going to say that, but from the races I haven't done, I'll say my next one, because that's the only one I care about now.
That's fair comment. That's absolutely fair comment. I think going back to what you said about Nantes as well, I like the fact that when you went down that second straight, even in practice, if a French rider went down that second straight, there were flags waving, everybody was going berserk. It was like the Stade de France in Paris when, you know, the French were playing the English at rugby union. It was that level of intensity and French passion. And like at Sarrions when, you know, Yoris won and they were all singing the French national anthem as they were all stood on the final straight. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I thought it was great. And I love the way that that passion comes through in every level of French sport. So yeah.
I get goosebumps thinking of that. It's the Worlds was crazy. Sarrions, like you said, was crazy as well. The podium ceremony was wicked as well. Everyone's singing. I think the French do sport, but BMX really well.
They do. So just before we wrap this up, I'm going to give you the opportunity to thank anybody that you want to thank. It's your time to just give a shout out to the people who have helped make it happen.
I want to thank my parents, my family for supporting me. Obviously, from a young age, you'd know, Rich, your parents need to sacrifice so many weekends, basically their social life, to help make a BMX be good at BMX, to take me to the track every night of the week and take me to all the races on the weekend, drive around the country, and then eventually, you know, around the world. So got to thank my family first, and all the families back home in New Zealand that support me, that follow my journey, and the sponsors that I have, obviously Dorian, Mark at Frenchies, and Inspire over here, that help make the dream possible. And they really, I was thinking about this podcast today, and they believed in me when I didn't believe in me, which is quite special to me. I remember flying over here thinking I was a bit out of my depth, thinking, do they know who they've signed? Like, do they think I'm better than I am or something? So to feel that feeling then, and to kind of, I feel like I belong here now. So I can't thank them enough, because they really believed in me when I was pretty low in my career. I didn't have much confidence or anything. And the same for the club. You know, they've invested a lot in me, and to repay them with my first French Cup podium on the weekend was pretty special at home, at my home track. So I can't thank the club enough. And to do BMX in a federation funded sport with no support from my federation, it requires a lot of support from, you know, the ones that do support me, from my club, my sponsors, my supporters back home. And my club back home put a lot of effort into raising money. You know, they sold shirts, Michael Bayer shirts, and gave me the profits. And I feel like I'm very well supported from the people that do support me. So I can't thank them enough. And yeah, hopefully I got everyone.
Cool. Fantastic. Well, that's a great place to end it then. But just want to say thank you for coming on the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure. You were very, very high on my list of people that I wanted to speak to, and I'm glad we've got you on very early on. So, yeah, thanks for being a guest. Thanks for being a part of it, and just look forward to seeing you, you know, at the rest of the World Cups. I take it you are going to Tulsa?
Yep, I'll be going to Tulsa, and I'll never forget, Rich, at one of my it was my first ever World Cup semi. You said that Michael Bayer can get where water can't, and it's never. I've never forgotten that. So thanks for your great commentary.
That was brilliant. Always good for a cheesy catchphrase every now and again. So I'll try and think of a few more for Tulsa. But yeah, thank you so much for joining me, and yeah, look forward to seeing you doing way more in the future, Mike. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Rich.
Cheers. Thanks.